Hi, it's Bill. Welcome to my fourth video, I think this is. Um, Today, I don't know, all kinds of upset about a lot of things that are going on that I listen to and read, and it just gets more disturbing by the day. And, like, if there's an end of times, we probably are pretty close at this point. Like, I think just shit's gonna pop off. It's gonna be bad. I don't want to think too deep about it right now, but this video, I want to talk about influence. I think that's a big thing because I'm asking myself all the time, how did we get here? How did we get to a point where, people are at each other's throats and these sides hate each other and, just marginalize and dehumanize just groups of people just because people you don't know, people you don't even know somebody that's like the group. You just jump on the bandwagon of who you should hate, and it's fucked up. It's fucked up. And you know, uh, in my lifetime, there's always been a lot of. I'd say in my earlier years, there was, still a good amount of racism and stuff around. And, as I started to get older, there was actually a real effort, I think collectively by everybody and in society to be better than that and do away with that and, teach your kids differently, and that was happening, and there's always, going to be people that are racist and whatever, and that comes from an influence, and I'll talk about that shortly. But like, I got kids, one kid is in middle school and the other kid is in elementary school. So I've been in elementary schools for many years now between the two boys. And when you walk through these schools, you see all of the promoting of diversity and equality, and for some reason at this point in time in our society, like, that's frowned upon, which I can't fucking understand. Like, people know right and wrong, good and evil, good and bad, right? Like, where do those things fall on those scales? Be treating your peers as equals around you, and treating them with dignity and respect, because like I said in my first or second video, that, like, one of the fundamental truths of being a human being is you can't choose being born. You can't choose how you're born, where. You can't choose what your ethnicity is, so, like, it from the very beginning, like, it's fucked up to have a bias against people solely based on anything of that nature. And it's like the kids are growing up like that, and that's what they're being taught in schools and everything, and then counterproductively, with how bad society's gotten and how racism is running rampant again and accepted by a very large swath of the United States, kids have that counterproductivity at home from parents that fall into that category, that regard people in really shallow and petty and unfair ways. And that bothers me a lot. And, I think that, there's still a lot of racism towards black people in this country. And, and it's a weird thing because a lot of racist people enjoy a lot of the culture and the arts and stuff that come out, from the black community and black entertainment artists. And, and then that's just kind of like exponentiated into, anybody that's foreign, and re embracing stereotypes, and turning against people like Mexicans and stuff, people from Latin America that are in this country, and whether they're here legally or not, honestly, I don't care that much. They're human beings, and borders aren't real. We made them. People made them. So what? The whole thing about this country is that we're a melting pot of all sorts of different ethnicities and nationalities and cultures, because we don't have one culture. We never really have had one culture. We came here with British culture, but we never really had a culture of our own. We're approaching 250 years. 250 years, that's it. Other countries have been around for like thousands and thousands of years. And before that, they didn't have borders, and they didn't have people that drew borders, and the people walked around in loincloths and shit, probably, before they evolved to the point of, civilizing a society. But people have become this way because of influence. Nobody came up with this shit on their own. Nobody did. Because you are born with a clean slate, a fresh start. You know nothing. You know nothing except what you are taught and what influences are put into your head. And I, as a parent, choose to try and be a good influence and put good things, into my kids' heads, and be a good member of society going forward that tries to bring people together instead of tearing people apart and turning them against each other. Why would anybody want that? Why would anybody want violence? Like, we've glorified the stuff that we see in movies and TV shows and stuff, and it's like, for some reason at this point, people are just so fucking hyped up about it that, they want it to be real. And now they're like, justifying, well, it's just fine if it's real in real life now, what's the difference anymore? And that's not okay. That's dangerous. That's dangerous. And those are, influences, at any stage of life right now, because, you can't even protect your kids from stuff anymore. You can put blocks and stuff on, their phones, but, somehow they're going to see the shit because they might be hanging out with a kid that doesn't have the blocks on their phone, or, it seems that no matter what kind of blocks I'd put up on YouTube and stuff like that, kids are still able to watch the stuff, and it's, as a parent, it's very frustrating. When I was younger, at 9 o'clock began prime time, and one time later in the 90s they said ass on NYPD Blue, and it was a big fucking deal. And then from there it just kind of snowballed into accepting vulgarity and stuff. And I don't even have a problem with vulgarity, honestly. And if you watch my videos, you see that I just very naturally drop F-bombs, because I don't really care much about swearing. My kids hear me swear, but they know that they can't, and I've never heard them say anything in front of me, and they know the kind of trouble they get if they say it in front of other adults or whatever, so I try and discourage them from doing that, and so far so good. But but going back to being born with a clean slate and a fresh start. Want to talk about the racism thing. Segregation ended in 1964. 1964. So that was 62 years ago? So my parents were born in the mid 50s, and their parents were born, in the 20s and 30s, and racism was normal back then. As shitty as it is to say that, it was normal, you know? And then you finally get to the point of segregation in 1964, and think of how many people, are over 70 years old. So, as they were coming into their adolescence and in their teen years and everything, they had been used to their whole life hearing racism and the N word and saying it, and, having a whole attitude towards that group of people. And then all of a sudden, 1964 happens and segregation officially ends, on the books. And then it's not like people just snapped out of it and said, "Okay, well, we're gonna change now." They're deep rooted in that. It's part of who they are and part of their personalities and stuff, I guess. Imagine, but um, it's and the people that were older when that happened, that have been used to that their whole lives, have a hard time changing, and they don't want to change. And I think that there's a good part of our population right now, because being that it was only 62 years ago, people my age and their parents, and people a little older than me and their parents, and even a little younger than me and their parents, still grew up with that to a certain point, and they were used to it, and they have just adapted that as part of how they live or who they are, or their worldviews, or And, I'm not even going to say that, when I was younger, I didn't grow up with a lot of that. And, until a certain point in my life, I was obnoxious and probably cruel, and I'm regretful of, little bits of it I remember. But at a certain point, as you grow and you gain wisdom, you start to realize it's not okay. Like, the people around you are your community. Like, want to you shouldn't want to have conflicts with them. If people cooperate together instead of trying to be so competitive all the time, then you're going to get a lot more, because collectively you can do more than one person or a small group of people. And that's just how it is in life. But so a lot of people, grew up with this racism, and some people, like myself, I I chose a path in my life to really just put myself around all kinds of people, all kinds of ethnicities, people that, are well to do, people that are just everyday, typical, stature, and people that, had it rough, and I've been all of those people at some point in my life to some degree. And, I take that as experience and gaining wisdom. And, if you're comfortable all the time in your ways, it's easy to just look down on people that you really shouldn't, you know? Like, when I've been with the people that, have a harder time through life, you see the pain and the despair and, the sincerity in their struggles. And, like, it's when you look at people and people and you meet people like that from all walks of life and all stages and statures, you start to, it's hard to group people in a certain way. You can, stereotypes, are generally shitty, but they're kind of observations that do tend to typically be true for, different nationalities of people, and they're not all bad either, but they're not really great. But you meet all kinds of people and you realize that, when they say it takes all kinds, it takes all kinds. But what it really doesn't take is bad kinds. It doesn't take people that are malicious or have ill intentions or, some sort of, shitty ulterior motives. And that's not cool. But So there's a lot of influence that shapes who you are, and religion is another big influence that shapes who people are. And there's people that truly live by the book and try to really be that way, and then there's people that just kind of more or less shallowly use it as a novelty. And they say the words but they don't mean or feel them. And there's I know an awful lot of people like that too, which is a shame. you know but you're supposed to be good to people. And it's really disheartening to see how shitty people have become to each other. And the influence of politics is huge, and that's a huge driver. And between big corporate America, that is the hugest influence, because they influence the government, because they buy and lobby politicians. They make deals behind closed doors and get laws passed, and they write the laws actually, and then they buy the politicians and have them put it through if they got the right people in office at the time. If not, they wait till the next round of people that they can bribe. And then the media, which should never, at this point, the media is in cahoots with the government and big corporate America. And all of those things are really bad, and all of those things are really huge influence, and all of those different factions all have their own selfish motives. And generally it's living really, really cushy lifestyles and continuing to be able to put themselves above other people and look down on people, and play their rich folk games and whatever. When at a certain point, like, these people are controlling everything, and it's a very small amount of people at the very top. And these people have so much money they're never going to spend. They can't spend it in their lifetimes. They're just going to pass it down to their children, and they're going to go through generational wealth and create, more affluent members of controlling society if things continue the way they are. But, for them, it's just like, they want to just have at the top of the list, who's number one, who's the richest person, who's got the most power. They don't even care about the money so much, but they love it, so they continue it. They don't even need it. They'll never need it, except to buy elections, politicians, the media, the people that influence you from the outside, which is, if they are, depending on, right now we have an administration that is wholly going in the wrong direction and has really encouraged a lot of racism and a lot of division between people. And because they're in cahoots with the media companies, and because the rich corporate conglomerates and CEOs and folks that own all those entities are now buying up all the media so that they can, just push the message that gets them richer, the government more power, the media continuing to live really cushy lives by lying right to your faces, and then encouraging the counterproductivity of what we're gaining as a society of becoming more accepting of everybody. And they put a stupid ass label on it like DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Well, those people are being marginalized, and they're being looked over for things, and they're being treated differently. So there should be some sort of way to compensate for that, to try and help along, in tandem with society trying to get better as a whole when it comes to all of this. But the thing is like, when I talk about the influence of the media, it's huge as Fox News and all those crazy right-leaning, podcasters and alternative news networks that exist on the internet that, for some reason they all got to have, advertisements selling shit scrolling on the side of their podcast while it's playing. Like, that should tell you what they're all about. They're just trying to sell you shit all the time. While they're trying to feed you bullshit, they're trying to sell you shit at the same time, simultaneously. They're not even waiting for commercial breaks. But these people are putting shit in your heads. But, CNN is fucking not good anymore, And now with the acquisition, they could be completely taken over like CBS has become, and NBC and ABC, those guys are afraid to really, they're towing the line of what they can say so that they don't get sued personally by Trump, who's trying to just make money off of suing people that say shit that he doesn't like as the president. Like, that has never been okay. That would have never been okay, ever. Why is it okay now? Why are people looking the other way? Like, this shit's crazy. But the amount of influence that's on you, and the media that's doing all that shit, like, all of those anchors on all of those channels are just, like, multi-millionaires. They're worth so much, And when you put that in contrast to, like, you as a normal person in your life and the struggles you go through, while they're telling you to make sacrifices and shit, and who cares about gas prices going up, it's a sacrifice that we make. They got a lot of fucking money. It doesn't really hurt them that much. So they can push this shit because they're not feeling it, And all the way up to the fucking top, they're really not feeling it. You think the president's put any fucking money in his gas tank? No, our money goes into his gas tank. Our money goes into the fucking planes that he flies all over the goddamn place. We pay for the fuel for the planes that take him all over the place. We pay for it, and it's going up. We pay for the fuel and everything that's got to go for all of these aircraft and war machines. And that cost is going up. Like, we pay for all this shit. So, the burden is heavily on us normal people. And the people that are telling us that we should hate each other and we should, take sides without taking any credence to any sort of, variables or factions within either side and just take it's a sports team mentality is fucking stupid. Because look where we are now. But people got to realize the influence is, and you got to break away your mind from just, thinking that these people are telling you the truth, because they're not. They're fucking lying to you because they're on the gravy train. They need it to keep going. They're going to keep it going as long as they can, and they know that it's coming to an end soon. The shit's going to hit the fan. Either it's all going to be taken over as state regime media from the federal government, or the media is going to stop this because they see that there's no more track and they're going to try and save face and do whatever they can, and there's just going to be a fucking train wreck. And everybody's already confused as it is from all the fucking lies in every direction and the half-truths and omitting important information. Like, you got people not right now need to find their own thoughts, because people have become so accustomed to just listening to people and having this mentality that, like, well, they can't possibly be lying to me because if they would, they'd be sued. But everybody's lying about everything that they tell you now. And nobody knows what's true and what's not, and you got to do a lot of paying attention and a lot of effort and a lot of listening to all the different sides and reading different angles and taking all things into consideration to know the truth. And at this point, it's our responsibility to make good decisions going forward, because our kids aren't going to have a future. The AI stuff is going to take over, so you got to stop going for the people that are rooting on the AI stuff. You're doing yourselves in, and you're doing your kids in, and you're doing your grandchildren in. It's got to stop. I don't know, there was some quote I saw that said, the scientists, always thought, could we? But then sometimes they never took time to stop and think, should we? And that's where we're going with technology and the AI stuff, because, I used to watch Terminator 2, and that was my favorite fucking movie back in the day when it came out. And, it was just a movie. It was just, some dystopian future prediction, but it was a movie, And now we're almost there, and it's going to be probably going to get to that. I don't know what we're going to do. Like, how do you pull the plug when things get too bad? The thing is, the people creating it are not people. You know, they don't like people. They're the people that are really into, you know, technology and stuff like that, and they're introverts and they hate the outside world, and they're very smart, so everybody's dumb compared to them, so they have disdain for them, and they are not creating this stuff genuinely with the mind of the good of the people and what will it do to them. They're just pushing the boundaries, and they are feeling really great about, you know, what they can do and how far they can take it and how much money they can make doing it, and living really great lives at this point out in Silicon Valley. But they are not designing and building this shit for normal people's benefit or anybody's benefit, because people are going to be out of jobs. You go to the local grocery store and you see fucking robot cleaners going through the aisles, and that used to be somebody's job. Now they don't have a job anymore. So they invested in this stupid little machine. Oh yeah, the machine can do it. That's happening everywhere. And it's going to happen more. And we need to be aware of it, and we need to be the people that speak up and say no. And the federal government can't push through this shit and say no regulations can be put in by the states. It's fucking insane. Because right now the federal government has a hard on for people that make a ton of money, and they love that shit. They don't give a shit about us. So they're like, hell yeah, what can I get out of it? I'll take a cut. I'll let you do what you want. That's how it really works. And you'd be really unwise to not recognize that and smarten up and really just be a part of getting things under control. And as far as, you know, what I was saying about influence, you know, follow the money, because there's always a motive. The further up you go, there's a motive. And there's a reason why people tell you what they tell you, and they make a lot of money off of it. And you don't. You spend a lot of money, your prices go up, and, you know, I'll talk more about prices going up in another video, because I have insights that maybe normal people don't, depending on what their industries are that they work in or their careers. But I have a lot of insight into corporate America. Anyways, this is a long video. You know, just be good people. Be good people. Think about the children. Think about the influence you have on them. Think about, you know, the world that we want to leave to these kids. You know, that's the most important thing right now. You know, we had the benefit of being left a better world than the generations before us, and I think we've already gone to the top of that hill, and we're going down. And, you know, as cool as technology is becoming, it's going to really be the end of everything. And, you know, people need to realize that. And look at your influences. Look at your influences that are all around you, and what you listen to and what you let feed into your mind. And, you know, maybe question the things that you would just normally take at surface level that you hear and just run with, and really ask the question why, and then really dig deep as to why, what makes sense. Honestly, be honest about it. I just want to do my part to make a better world, and I'm sorry if anybody, you know, hates me for these videos. I made a video yesterday, and, you know, it was very passionate, and I decided not to post it. You know, I figured I would try again today. And I don't know, like and subscribe, share the video. I hope that you guys like this. I hope you guys take something away from this positive. It's coming from a good place, everybody. Peace out.